All right, this is section 8.1 review of story problem questions you're going to see on your test. The first question says the average speed of a vehicle S is represented by the formula S equals distance divided by time, where D equals distance and T equals time. So with this question, these types of algebra questions are the most basic. And if you think about what they're going to be used the most for is when you take high school sciences, especially physics. Well, I guess in all subjects, you deal with formulas and being able to substitute information into a formula and solve it using BEDMAS. So we're going to just take this formula, S equals distance over time, and we're going to substitute that, which we know. So it says if Toby drove an average speed of 85, so we know speed is going to be 85, for 3.75 hours, so his time is 3.75 hours. How far did you travel? So once we substitute all that information into our formula, we have this really easy thing to simplify. To isolate for D, we're going to simply multiply both sides by 3.75. Isolating D, and D will equal the product of 3.75 by 85, which equals 318.75. Or if you wanted to get real fancy, 318 and 3/4. And that is how far he traveled, because that's the distance. So therefore, you would put a sentence on your test. Therefore, he traveled 318 and 3/4 kilometers. So our second formula, we're going to start with still speed equals distance divided by time. This time, if Faith drove 156 kilometers, that's the distance she drove. We're going to erase the D, and we're going to put in 152 kilometers at an average speed of 95 kilometers per hour. How long did it take? So now we have this two-step algebraic equation. When you have your variable in the denominator, we're going to multiply both sides by t. You get 152 over here. Now you have this 95 times t. So we're going to treat the 95 as a coefficient, and we're going to put 95t. And we're going to divide both sides by that coefficient to get t equals, and then if I take 152 divided by 95, I get 1.6. So 1.6 hours is the time. Now watch, this is important. Therefore, the time it would take 1.6 hours. Now, this is important that you understand what 0.6 hours really represents in minutes. So if I think about a clock, and I think about the distance around one loop, there are 60 minutes in an hour. So 0.1 hours is 6 minutes, right? It's a tenth of an hour. So if you broke up that 60 minutes into 10 parts, 1/10 of that hour is 6 minutes. So therefore, 6/10 of an hour, which is what this decimal part represents, is really 36 minutes. So on your test, in brackets, I would appreciate to show off, if you could, by changing it to 1 hour bracket 36 minutes.